Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. As evidenced by our continued video issues, where Discord just hates us, and I can't get Frank's visuals on the screen. So, sorry again for depriving you of Frank's wonderful face. But hopefully, we will figure out how to get this resolved sooner or later. Worst case scenario, maybe I'll just start looking at options other than Discord.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions of the thing. So if you like the show, and you can subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Joining me today, we have, as I said, Frank Bizzani. How you doing, Frank?
Doing good. I'm looking forward to chatting about this movie with you. I really like this one.
Indeed. This is kind of part 2 of our sequels in our holiday 2021 season. Obviously, we did The Santa Claus 2 last week, and here we are with Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. Before we kick into some of the, I guess not newer movies, in part because there's like very little in the way of like new Christmas movies each year. Or at least new like classics. Like I remember thinking a couple years ago that like Elf was like the last really like classic Christmas movie, and that's like 20 years old at this point or something. It's like it's crazy how long that one came out. But yeah, here we have kind of the back from the heyday of these early 90s kind of Christmassy movies.
And it's it's cool too because it's like a big budget Christmas movie. Like this is a real movie, like this is just like a John Hughes excellent amazing movie, and it just also happens to be like this cool Christmas movie. But to your point, like you're never gonna get something like that like these days, I feel like.
Yes, to be fair to all of the Lifetime and Netflix Christmas movies that come out every year, like the 30 of them that come out each year, they're definitely happening. Actually, I really enjoyed Jingle Jangle that came to Netflix last year. It had that like big budget feel. I don't think it grabbed an audience as much as like an Elf, of course, but I imagine that's like in people's regular rotation in the holiday spirit of things. Also Claus, I think it was or Klaus or whatever, like the animated one. I know Ben Bellevue, for example, loved that and thought it was like immediately one of the best Christmas movies ever. And I enjoyed it. It didn't resonate with me as much as it did with him, but it was a good movie. It was basically like Emperor's New Groove, but with Christmas. So
I mean, it sounds great, honestly, though, when you put it like that.
Yeah.
While we're on the topic of like the modern Christmas movie, though, I did forget about. I'll give a quick shout out to I think it's called The Night Before. It's the one with Seth Rogen and Anthony Mackie and I forget his name. Joseph Gordon-Levitt. That's why I couldn't think of. But yeah, it's the three of them, and it's like they're buddies, and they like hang out every Christmas Eve, and it's actually a really great like comedy. And a part of me and my friend group is that we watch that like every year for like the last like 5 years or whatever. So I mean, like I think that's also kind of like a cool modern kind of classic.
Nice. Yeah, I don't think I'd heard about this one.
It's really great. I definitely recommend it.
All right, cool. But yes, so back to Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. Obviously, why do we pick this? Once again, we're in our holiday month here on That Day Plus show, doing a handful of. I think they're all Christmas movies. I don't think there's a ton in the way of like other holidays around this time, but in the Christmas spirit, in the holiday spirit of things. So we're doing this. We did Santa Claus 2. I believe next week the plan is for Jingle All the Way, so that should be a fun one. And there's like one more that we'll need to kind of get out there before Book of Boba Fett will wrap up our holiday month. Because what else screams holidays than Star Wars? A little bit of the history lesson here on Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. Originally released November 20th, 1992. Which is like a year or two after the first one. I forgot to jot that one down. But it was, like a much quicker turnaround than last week's The Santa Claus 2. Let me see. Home Alone.
At least they didn't do the thing with Charlie where like Macaulay Culkin would be like 15 all of a sudden,
Right.
and like
Yeah.
he's Buzz's age.
Yeah, Home Alone. The first Home Alone was 1990, so this was a 2-year turnaround. 2 years later. So yeah, they still got Macaulay Culkin, who was like one of the biggest stars on the planet at this point because of Home Alone. But they got him back for Home Alone 2. Other releases that we had of the time, a month and a half earlier, we had the first Mighty Ducks movie, which you can find an episode of that D Plus show here. We also had that. So some of these are actually like a little bit familiar in my mind because I pulled the other releases of that time for the Mighty Ducks one. But in that vein, we had a week later, October 9th, gave us Under Siege with Steven Seagal.
Hell yeah. The classic.
November of 23rd or November 13th rather of this year was the Disney output on this side of things, because Home Alone, I will point out, it was a Fox franchise that is just now under the Disney banner, obviously with that acquisition, but yeah, on the Disney side of things, Aladdin had come out a week before this, back at this time. Home Alone 2 there on November 20th. The Bodyguard would come out a week later, November 25th, and I Will Always Love You, just which was already like a Dolly Parton song, but Whitney Houston shot it through the roof. On December 11th, we had a odd combination of A Few Good Men and the Muppet Christmas Carol movie. Go find our Muppet Christmas Carol that D Plus show from last year's holiday season as well. And then on Christmas that year, the movie Chaplin with a young Robert Downey Jr. came out. Solid little biopic of Charlie Chaplin's life. Home Alone has a runtime of 2 hours. In the 20th Century Fox timeline of things, let's see, that year had also given us Ferngully: The Last Rainforest back in April. Alien 3 came out in May of 1992. Last of the Mohicans came out September 25th. And Home Alone 2 here on November 20th. Toys would be one of their next big releases, December 18th, with Robin Williams. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 came out the following March 17th, 1993. And a few weeks later, we would get The Sandlot, April 7th, 1993. So just putting it in the context of where this all fell within things.
It's a ton of great movies, honestly, though, especially in that like kind of 2-3 year span.
Yeah. I mean, I typically try and pull like the notable movies. There are a ton of flops and stuff that like nobody remembers when I typically go through these lists too. So I'm like, no point in pulling that, which I don't have anything to say about, and nobody else would either. The director once again is Christopher Columbus on this, or Chris Columbus on this, who had also directed the first one. Also, other directing credits of his were Adventures in Babysitting, Heartbreak Hotel, the first Home Alone, as I mentioned. He would also go on to do Mrs. Doubtfire, first 2 Harry Potter films, the movie adaptation of Rent, the Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Lightning Thief, Pixels. And actually, I think I realized like I didn't update some of these because I just copied and pasted them from last year. Last year, I mentioned that he's like attached to direct the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. That may have changed in the time since. Like I know there's been some shake up in the Five Nights at Freddy's cinematic universe. So he may no longer be attached to that. I don't know.
Reading all those movies off, he's had a real like up and down career of like he's had some great movies and then he's had some like random like not great movies on there, and like I don't even know how like a Five Nights movies by him would like be necessarily. I mean that's definitely like like I pulled it in last year for Five Nights because I was like, that it seems like a stark departure from all these like very kid friendly movies. And then like Rent is not a kid movie, but it was an iconic movie for like a generation of musical theater kind of people, and the fact that he finally got to direct it 15 years later or whatever.
Let's see. Is he still attached to Five Nights at Freddy's? He's no longer attached to Five Nights at Freddy's, so no idea what's going on with Five Nights at Freddy's. Glad we updated that. Anyway, John Hughes, once again, the writer on this one, having also written the original. Of course, John Hughes, also known for his work on films like 16 Candles, The Breakfast Club, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Uncle Buck, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, Beethoven, Flubber, and Made in Manhattan. And I just found this amusing last time around, so I'll repeat it here. The fact that Beethoven and Made in Manhattan were written under his pseudonym Edmond Dantes, which is an allusion to one of the protagonists of The Count of Monte Cristo. So just love that John Hughes was out there writing movies that he didn't really want to put his name on, but he was happy to put somebody else's name on. As is often the case on these kinds of movies, the sequels, I kind of have broken out the starring section into kind of our returning cast as well as the new cast here. So for our returning cast, of course, we have Macaulay Culkin as Kevin, who had done Uncle Buck, as well as the first Home Alone. He's also iconically in the Michael Jackson Black or White video, the films My Girl, The Good Son, The Pagemaster, and Richie Rich. He was much like both the kid who played Charlie as well as the kid who played the old elf in the Santa Claus 2 last week. Curtis.
Bernard? Or Curtis.
Curtis. Yeah. Like both of those were kind of the kids of their era in a handful of things. But Macaulay Culkin was, of course, like the iconic kid of this era of films. Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern back as Harry and Marv, a.k.a. the Wet Bandits, a.k.a. the Sticky Bandits. Joe Pesci, of course, in films like Raging Bull, the continuing with the Michael Jackson trend. He was in the Moonwalker and Smooth Criminal videos. He was in Lethal Weapon 2, Goodfellas, My Cousin Vinny, Casino, and most recently he was in, he kind of came out of his pseudo-retirement to be in The Irishman. Was that last year, a couple years ago now? Yeah, a couple years now. And then Daniel Stern as Marv. I always like pulling this one up because I did a That D Plus show on the film Frankenweenie, but Daniel Stern was like in the Frankenweenie short that Tim Burton did for Disney back when he worked for Disney in like the mid 80s.
Oh wow.
Daniel Stern was like the dad in that the short that kind of would inspire the animated Frankenweenie many years later. He of course was also the voice of Kevin, kind of looking back in the Wonder Years, kind of the narrator voice. He would go on to be in stuff like City Slickers, the film Rookie of the Year, as well as the series, the animated series of Dilbert, where he would play, I believe, the titular character Dilbert. Catherine O'Hara returning as the mom, aka Kate, who had of course done Beetlejuice as well as the first Home Alone. She would go on to be in The Nightmare Before Christmas as Sally, as well as like Waiting for Guffman, a whole bunch of those Christopher Guest films. She was in both series of Unfortunate Events adaptations, the Jim Carrey one as well as the Neil Patrick Harris one. She was also in Frankenweenie, the fully animated version. And then, of course, she had a good kind of late career run in recent years with the series Schitt's Creek, winning an Emmy and probably a Golden Globe and a whole bunch of other awards in that show's later years. And then lastly, of the returning cast, I always love pulling in here that Kieran Culkin, is also in there as Fuller, aka Macaulay Culkin's younger brother, who would go on to be an actor in his own right in Father of the Bride. I remember seeing him in The Dangerous Lives of Altar Boys, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, and most recently Succession, which even got him an SNL hosting stint. So nice. Shout out to Kieran Culkin as young Fuller, who just always wets the bed. Uh, in the new cast of characters, a lot of these people basically pulling from the hotel shenanigans, but then we have a couple others. We have Dana Ivey as the desk clerk, who was also in Addams Family and Addams Family Values around this time. And most recently, she was in the film, or more recently, I guess not most recently. She's probably done a couple other things since, but she was in the film Ocean's 8. Tim Curry, of course, playing the concierge, of course, known for Rocky Horror Picture Show, Clue, Muppet Treasure Island, and a ton of other things. He's been in a handful of other That D Plus shows recently, including Dinosaurs, which Frank and I talked about a few weeks back, as well as he was in the Mighty Ducks animated series that I did back earlier this year.
He's
yep.
so amazing in everything, but he's also just great in this movie.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know if the hotel stuff would be as good without him and without like the hotel people they got, you know?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Speaking of Rob Schneider playing the bellman in one of his early film appearances, of course, had done SNL, ton of Adam Sandler stuff, and Deuce Bigelow. Brenda Fricker playing the pigeon lady here was also in So I Married an Axe Murderer and the film Angels in the Outfield. And then lastly, Eddie Bracken playing Mr. Duncan was in, I mean, he had a very long storied career, going back to, a ton of stuff in like the 40s, 50s, 60s, I think. But shouting out National Lampoon's Vacation as well as Rookie of the Year. A little bit of trivia before we hop into some of our favorite bits and moments. Macaulay Culkin was paid $4.5 million to star in this movie, biggest salary ever to an 11-year-old at the time of filming child actor. After one scene, Macaulay Culkin asked Joe Pesci why he never smiled. Pesci told him to shut up. At the time, Pesci said, he's pampered by a lot of people, but not me, and I think he likes that. And kind of knowing like Macaulay Culkin's trajectory, yeah, I think he probably did.
Yeah.
All the children who appeared in the toy store scene were allowed to take their favorite toy home as part of their salary, even though it didn't work and it was created specifically for the movie as a prop. Macaulay Culkin was allowed to keep the talk boy. In Home Alone, Kevin watched a movie called Angels with Filthy Souls. In this movie, he watches that movie's sequel, Angels with Even Filthier Souls. Like Angels with Filthy Souls, Angels with Even Filthier Souls is not a real movie and was filmed separately from and specifically for Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. Of course. The talk boy, the tape recorder with which Kevin played in the movie, did not actually exist before Home Alone 2. It was a prop created specifically for the movie. After the movie, it became a box office hit. Tiger Electronics created and distributed a real version of the Talk Boy, along with its pink and purple counterpart, the Talk Girl. Back because, of course, 90s needed gendered toys.
Oh yeah.
Because the silver, like default gray version just screams boy. This is probably my favorite trivia from this movie. When Kevin got on the New York City bound plane, he sits next to a French man asking him if he's ever been to Florida. The man responds in French. What he said was, "What's that? I'm going to France and I'm a tourist here. It's my first time coming to America. Do you know a good restaurant? Or maybe your parents, they know a good place? Why aren't you responding? You speak a bit of French, right? I don't speak English at all. Give me a bit of help at least. My name is Andre. What's your name?" It's just like, especially because like watching the movie, it's just like that whole thing, not subtitled at all, just kind of like speaks French or whatever. And the guy goes on this whole thing and yeah, Kevin's just like, I don't know what's going on. Just kind of starts looking around the rest of the plane. And this guy just has like a whole little monologue there. So I love that somebody kind of transcribed it here into the IMDb trivia. Go ahead.
I wanted to throw in a tidbit off that because I've seen this movie a ton and I had never really, I guess, thought about like what was he saying.
Mm-hmm.
But before I had looked at the doc to see that, I like Googled it during the movie. After that scene, I was like looking online, like what is the translation of what this guy said? And I found that same thing. And then I also found a guy in the comments who was like, yeah, he has a really bad American accent. He's like really bad at French. And I was like, I had never realized. I was like, oh, that's just an American actor that they had just speaking French lines. And apparently he's bad at it, according to a French person.
Or like, I imagine he knew French, like he took French in school or something like that. So they were like, yeah, just go ahead and like improvise, some French. And so he's not being a Frenchman, or he should have been being a Frenchman, but yeah, it's just an American actor like doing like it'd be like if I went on a thing and it was like "Donde está la biblioteca?" It's like, yeah, no, that's not a great Spanish accent. It's just me pulling my ninth grade Spanish. So yeah, fun little bit there. But I love that there's like a French commenters out there being like, "Oh, it's Sacre Bleu, he sucks." And now they're gonna be mad at me too. Lastly, I added this like right before we started the show because I was just like, I when we do these shows, I typically have like the IMDb in case like we talk on something that like triggers like another piece of trivia I had seen that I didn't feel like pulling in here. But in this case, just going through and having the trivia up right before we started, I saw this one as like one of the like last ones on the list, and so I want to give a thank you to this very pedantic IMDb user and the 25 people who found this interesting. Despite the title, Kevin is not really home alone, but rather in New York City alone. Yep, you got him. It was a branding thing, not really the plot of the movie this time around.
That is definitely the kind of thing you see on the subreddit movie details.
Yeah.
Like somebody noticed a detail in a movie, like if you look close enough, he's not actually home alone.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, let's dive in and talk about Home Alone 2: Lost in New York. Logan originally wanted to join us for this, but ended up not being able to make the schedule work. So he was interested in doing this. But you, Frank, have repeatedly kind of in the planning and kind of like prep into kind of our holiday stuff, really wanted to be on this show because you really, really love Home Alone 2: Lost in New York. So gonna tell me your history with it and what you thought kind of revisiting it.
Yeah. So I do really love this movie. It is probably my favorite Christmas movie. Like there's like a ton and there's a bunch of really good ones, but I think this one still kind of holds that for me. For whatever reason too, I know it hits a lot of the same beats as the first movie, but I just like this one even better than like the first movie. And there's like jokes that I think are funnier. Like I love the hotel staff and all the tons of the bits they do with them. And I know he kind of like reuse that the bit with like the old footage from the movie and him like fooling them with it. But I still think it's so much funnier here where they're in like when they're on the floor in the hallway and everyone's coming out of their rooms looking and Tim Curry's crawling on the ground. He's like, "There's a madman with a gun." Mm-hmm. Like there's just something about it. I definitely love.
That bit just alone as like an evolution of the one for like, because in the first movie it's a lone pizza guy and the guy and it's just Kevin kind of bilking him and not letting the guy get tip money or whatever. And here it is, there's a whole comedy of errors scene with like the 3 hotel people that we know and then like just 2 random security guards that have joined them. So there's like 5 of them getting fooled and we get reactions from all of them. We get that little bit where like, "I seen you smooching with everybody, including Clint," or whatever. And like and the security guard has Clint on his name badge. He's like, "Not me." And just like they have like a ton of fun. Like it is a great case of, this is a joke that we liked from the first movie. How can we add to it this time around?
Oh yeah, definitely. And that's like, that was one of in the favorite moments part. That was one of the ones I was going to bring up is like the cliff thing where like that's still one of my favorite bits and it still hits today. I've seen that literally like 15 times and it still just makes me laugh, especially because even this time, I probably noticed this before too, but I love that even Tim Curry looks at him and like they all turn to look at Cliff, and I'm just like Tim, it's not true. Like you're not making out with Cliff.
You didn't kiss him or smooch him. Yeah.
But yeah, so to answer your other part there for my history with it, like I forget when the first time I would have saw this was because I was like would have been super 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 young. But I definitely remember at some point even as like a small kid, I made it a point to be like, I gotta watch this every year. Mm-hmm. Like this was like my tradition thing for up until I was like at some point in my teens. I literally just I always had to make it a point to like watch this every like Christmas. Mm-hmm. And again, even after seeing it like over a dozen times, I still think it totally holds up. And I have most recently saw it a couple years ago, so it's still been like 3 or 4 years since I've seen it. But it's I still think it's super funny, and honestly, it even gets super heartwarming at the end with like Catherine O'Hara and the family and everybody, and like I think she's a great actress and does a great performance in this. And I also love Duncan too. Like
Mhm.
he's such like he nails that like sweet old man. And he has like all those right, like sweet, good intentions. And even though it made me laugh this time, especially when he's like, yeah, I'm going to take all the money and I'm going to bundle it up and take it over to the hospital. And I was like, I don't think that's how donations work. Like, I don't think you could just show up with a sack full of money and like throw it at the hospital. Like,
I mean, you could, but it's all like I kind of responded in a similar vein of like, oh, he's just doing that thing a ton of corporations do, where he's just going to get a tax write-off for the
yeah.
corporation by donating all this revenue, but he's still got the revenue. He's still going to get like he still earns that money or whatever. But yeah, it's like it's the thing I think of like now when it's like you go to Taco Bell and they're like, hey, would you like to donate $1 for whatever cause we're doing? It's like, no, if I want to do that, I'll get the tax deduction and I'll donate them to them directly. I'm not going to donate them to them through you guys so you can get a corporate write-off on that. Like,
Yeah.
no. But it's that exactly that same kind of thing. But here it is kind of like done in the spirit of like actual generosity and like, a kindly old man kind of thing. But yeah, it's definitely weird like looking at that, knowing a little bit more about economics and stuff these
Yeah.
days. That's like, oh yeah, it does kind of put a different lens on watching a movie like this.
Yeah, because you're like, hey, Duncan, that's a gigantic toy store in New York. That's got to be expensive. He's making a lot of money.
Mhm.
He can afford to just get rid of this one day of profit and to
Yeah.
just get a huge write off in return.
Yeah. Oh, you're donating the people who were foolish enough to wait until the very last minute. Okay. That's undoubtedly a lot of money, but also, not nearly as much as if you'd done your Black Friday, sales or what. Like you could have done more, Duncan.
But yeah, I do really love this movie, and I'm almost curious to see like what you think. Because I mean, are you like I don't know if I have like your opinion on it. I assume you also like it. Like,
Oh yeah, I love this movie. Yeah, this is, I mean, for me, we talked a little bit about it last week with kind of the Santa Claus to Santa Claus 2 thing. Like these movies and the Santa Claus came out like at that perfect time for me as a kid, that like I watched these all the time. And like it wasn't even just like at Christmas. I would watch these like throughout the year. We had them on VHS and I would just throw them in, in June or something like that.
yeah,
And we would watch these movies. But these two in particular, like this came out when I was 7 years old. And as a very young kid who had blonde hair, like I was always being compared to Macaulay Culkin by my family.
yeah,
And so I would always do like the and those kinds of things. And so it was very much like like Kevin was life goals kind of thing.
yeah, yeah,
Like even, when I would eventually go to New York, 15 years later or something like that, when my sister graduated high school and she and I went for a week and just kind of like did a tour. Like there's a little bit of me that was like remembering back to like iconic bits and locations and stuff that Kevin had gone to,
oh yeah,
like Rockefeller Center and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, this was very much like a touchstone of my childhood. It probably what like the, I mean, just because of like ease of access, the movie that was like I watch this every year was A Christmas Story. And that was
oh
just
yeah,
because
yeah,
it always played on TBS, is like that 24-hour marathon or whatever. And so that
yeah,
was the movie that like when I woke up at like 5 a.m.,
yep.
wanted to open presents on Christmas Day, but knew that like nobody else in the family was going to want to get up that early. I would sit there and watch A Christmas Story like a time and a half until other people started waking up. And it wasn't until years later that I realized, oh, like my parents were probably also just getting to bed by the time I was waking
Yeah.
up because they had stayed up all night wrapping presents or whatever.
Dude, that
Um,
was the same exact thing with me and my family and my parents, and that's why, like, I can only imagine. There's a decade plus probably where they literally probably just fell asleep, and then we came busting in
Yeah.
just loud as hell, like, "Come on, come on, come on!"
yeah. But yeah, this movie brings back so many memories, and it's been a while since I've watched it, sure. But like just so many of those things. Like I love how like Talkboy immediately gets introduced,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I remember how that's going to come back. Uncle Frank, like creepy Uncle Frank showering with the door open in a house full of kids, just
Yeah.
like has no problem, no shame about his privacy or whatever. um,
I thought the
uh,
lead up to that, the joke was really funny
yeah,
when
yeah.
Kevin repeats what Uncle Frank had told him, and then like
Mhm.
his parents' reaction, and I was like, "That's so funny!"
Yeah,
Like,
it's definitely a joke I did not get when I was a kid, that I much more appreciate now as an adult. So yeah, there are just a ton of things in here, but then there were also like so many just small things that I had forgotten, or things that like I definitely wouldn't have caught or understood in the context of me being 7 years old or something like that. So like there's a ton of joy to kind of like revisiting a movie like this and getting like that new perspective, marred a little bit by, and I knew it was coming. And so like when it comes and goes, I'm very glad it's for how brief it is. But like, the Donald Trump cameo that comes in, I'm just like,
oh yeah,
oh
yeah,
God. And just like, A, because I'm like, oh, that's right, I know it's coming up. And B, I'm like, but Donald Trump wouldn't be caught dead in a hotel that's not his, right? No, there he is. Um, and also just terrible actor. Like for his one line, he just mugs to the camera like a dumbass that he is. Um, so like that aside, like there, like all this stuff with, because yeah, we talked about this a little bit last week. When we were either when we were talking about it in the Santa Claus 2, or like after, and we were just talking about the movie. But like the Rob Schneider stuff with like the tip, like that's
yep,
what I
yeah,
think about when I think about like giving somebody a tip, is because like I was 7. I didn't know that was a thing until this movie. Like tipping in general, I probably didn't know was a thing, but let alone tipping like hotel staff. And
yeah.
admittedly, like my family and I, like we always stayed at like Motel 6 or something like that. So we never had a bellhop that was like helping with our bags or anything that was getting tips. But it's definitely still something I think about like now when I go to like, the PAX things. I'm like, do I feel bad that I'm not leaving these people a tip, or should I be leaving a tip? Or I don't know what the protocol is. I'm not interacting with anybody directly, so there's nobody to do like the
Yeah, yeah.
kind of like give me money thing that Rob Schneider does. But I definitely like it's always kind of in the back of my mind of like, well, I don't have any gum.
That's what I was gonna say. You have to get like a pack of fruit stripe like
Yeah,
Kevin has and just carry it around.
yeah. Um, but yeah, and like I love even that's like that carries on to the end, and Buzz gives him gum too. He's just like, nice family. Um, uh, yeah. Oh, I had almost like, it's weird because I suppose I hadn't forgotten it, but it sticks out a little bit, like the opening bit where Kevin has like a solo in like the choir, like the choral concert or whatever, and like just that
Yeah.
whole sequence, like that's another thing, like much like we talked about last week with the Santa Claus 2, like that feels more like somebody had an idea for a sketch than like it doesn't really feed into the rest of the movie apart from like setting Kevin at odds with the family again, I guess. Um, but yeah, it just feels like a weird little like, oh, that's right, that's a scene in this movie too. But let's get to New York. Like that's where we want to get to. Um, so yeah,
I'm 100% with you on that because that's honestly like I do really love the movie and there's not much I would change about it if anything, but that is honestly like I don't like that scene that much, and because it's, I mean, and like I guess I don't know because it's not, I don't find it that funny, and I also like I hate the like animosity that it brings in
yeah,
between some of them, and then
yeah,
also like he gets embarrassed in front of all these people, and it makes me want to like cringe in my
yeah.
own house.
And it's
I'm like I just like I don't like a lot of that.
yeah, and it's like it's just not even like Buzz isn't even being a good bully in that. Like he's
Yeah,
I guess the implication is he's using the plastic candles to like light up Kevin's ears or something like that. And I'm like, but bunny ears is right there. You could have just done bunny ears, and that's a funnier bit.
yeah.
And less subtle, I guess. Like and to the point that it would get a reaction from a crowd versus like other people who are just gonna be like, what's he doing there? And then eventually starts doing the drumming or whatever. But yeah, it's like the fact that like this entire crowd of people has no problem laughing at Kevin, and then like
Yeah.
turns on Kevin when he actually like tries to stand up for himself. It's like, fuck you, fuck your whole town, fuck this family. Like, yeah, Kevin is better off without all of you guys.
That's how it definitely feels, because then when he breaks off on his own and he's having a good time, I'm like, good for you, Kevin.
Yeah.
Like,
you live your best life out there in New York, away from your terrible family. Let them suffer the storms of Florida. They can't even have, you know, the sunny Christmas that they were hoping for. Ha ha ha. Serves them right. They suck. Yeah. It's also like, it's such a fun time capsule of being like, none of this could happen now because of airport security. Like,
yeah,
how wild it was that like I mean, like, admittedly, it of course wouldn't have happened at that time either.
It was more feasible though. Like, you could at least get away with the premise.
Exactly. Yeah. So much more feasible. Just even the rushing through the airport as a family or something like that. Like, if you see a ton of people rushing through an airport, TSA is stopping those people and questioning the shit out of them. These days. But yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, because I love the part about it where it's not even just like the boarding pass thing where they don't check his pass and it gets mixed up with the other ones, but like they don't even like get him with the family. Like, the guys like get him with his family and then whatever, and he's just like, that's my dad, and they don't even check, and she's just like, okay, bye, Merry Christmas, and then leaves him there. And I was just like, wow, okay, damn. Like,
yeah, that is like, in another universe, that is just a very young con man who just snuck his way onto a flight in New York. Like, he saw, like, he grabbed a piece of paper, plowed into a woman, and, you know, flew up all the boarding passes. Like, my parents are on the plane, help. And then just points out a guy in a trench coat, and boom, he's free flight to New York. Yeah.
It's like the prequel to Catch Me If You Can.
Exactly.
It's like a kid who's just a con man all of a sudden.
Yeah. But like, yeah, just such a fun little thing. And then, like, at that same time though, like, I think about, like, if that did happen, what is the reality of how, in this like pre-cell phone age, in this digital age, like, how would they have like found him at because like the last they knew, he was there at the airport with them in Chicago, and like the cops, like, he's most likely still in Chicago. They wouldn't have, like, he wouldn't have been able to get onto another flight because he didn't have a boarding pass for that other flight. So like, it stands perfectly to reason that he would still be in an airport in Chicago. And like the just the plot decision and the writing decision to make it that like the credit card is what triggers them to like know that he's in New York is like, that's just really good writing for a movie here in the early 90s. That like, that's the kind of like, that is the kind of plot point that you see in like detective movies and stuff like that, or kind of those types of things of like, how are we going to find the bad guy? Oh, let's, trace his credit card or something like that. Let's report the credit card stolen, like that kind of thing. So the fact that like they throw that into this like kids movie is a really smart beat that like really holds up, even as we're looking at like technology, what it was there in the early 90s of like, I remember having, I had to do that like a couple times in my life where like I do like push, like do the thing over the credit card to like get the imprint of the credit card number on the slip, versus like the now digital where you would swipe it in something or now stick it in something with the chips. And yeah, just seeing like how that tech still did the job and still like, came up stolen, and you get like that great Tim Curry Grinch face that comes up with that. But yeah, it's just like a great plot point to like solve the problem of how does the family find Kevin? Because it's not like with the first movie, it was easy. Kevin's just home. We can't get a hold of him because like the neighbors aren't there, but we can call the cops. They can go check on him and hopefully find him or something like that. And so yeah, like the case of like, how do we as writers get them back to Kevin in New York. Oh, stolen credit card. Boom, that lets them know he's in New York. Let's all somehow get to New York. And I love that they like the McAllisters are also kind of like given carte blanche everywhere they go because of this like terrible mistake. Like the like they get free flights to New York because because the airplanes and the airports let their kid completely unattended fly to New York City. And then the hotel, like they get, carte blanche at the hotel, the best penthouse suite because they let their kid check in unattended and just like admittedly, like Kevin just committed a whole ton of fraud, but like all of the people that let him commit the fraud are the ones that like get punished as a result. And I just really appreciate that.
Oh yeah, yeah. I love all that, and because that's one of the things I did want to bring up too. Is like I think it is just so well written, and like it's like to your point, but what you mentioned before too is like in the first couple minutes they set up so much that comes back, and like when it's going to happen, like she gives him the clown thing for like, oh, I bought this for you for the pool, and then and then the camera, and he like unplugs the alarm clock and all that, and then it's the same thing where Kevin's watching TV, so he sees the ad for the Plaza Hotel and he's able to like record it. And then it's just like all these really smart things that just keep coming back and that they just keep being able to like pull from. And then to your point there, yeah, like the credit card. And that's even goes like a little bit deeper too, where it's like Kevin's like, oh, I need batteries for my talk boy. So dad gives him the bag. So then now he has all the dad stuff. And then that's how he has a credit card, and then he can go check in at the hotel and everything. And that was a bit funny where like I love how smart Kevin is in the movies, but it was also funny where I'm like, how did he know exactly how that conversation was going to play out? Like, she's like how did he know that he was going to need a credit card?
Yeah, that's definitely like a bit of the suspension of disbelief that like he just very coincidentally, I mean, like same with the talk boy and like anytime he uses the talk boy, anytime he uses the movie, like the fact that he's able to fast forward to the exact line to trigger the next bit of the conversation, like that's very like absolutely like a complete cheat, but it's like whatever, they're having fun with it. Like they set it up earlier so we know how the scene plays out, and now we're getting to see it playing out in this other new context. Still fun, but yeah, it's absolutely a bit of a cheat there. But even like I appreciate that, like I wonder if he'd know to check on my brother or whatever, like on his house, and yeah, Kevin saw that in the address book and said, oh, I wonder if they're back. Nope, they were still in France or whatever on vacation on holiday. But it's like, oh, they set up like, oh, I thought he was like renovating. And so that's why Kevin's got a whole brand new house to mess with the sticky bandits on, to set up the third act. So you still get all that fun Home Alone goodness of murdering a couple of old white guys.
And they really turned up the dial in this one too. Like he really goes for it on them. Like he has a vendetta now. Like he's trying to kill them.
Yeah, there a ton of people have done these kinds of things, but I remember a couple years ago, I want to say it was like Screen Junkies or somebody did a video of they were like, we hired doctors to kind of analyze all of the injuries that happened to the wet bandits / sticky bandits in the first two Home Alone movies. Let's see how many times these characters die, or like how would they survive. It's like like Harv Harry dies like 3.5 times and ends up with a whole bunch of broken bones or something like that, and like Marv dies like 7 times over, something like some kind of weird like they basically do those stats of like, yep, like this fall would have broken ribs or whatever. The bricks to the face would have like easily given concussions, if not just outright killed him. The electrocution killed him a couple times over kind of thing, because of how long it goes on. Harry, like literally, like, because I forget, or I forgot that, like I remember the like, oh, his head gets lit on fire. I forgot that like the toilet slash only source of water in that has been like, set up to be acetone or whatever, like highly flammable. So like that explosion definitely kills Harry as well.
Oh yeah.
Especially like based on how we see it like permeate through the rest of the house in that like cutaway. Like yeah, they all die a whole bunch of times over. But even there, like I love that like they're not a recurring threat and presence throughout the movie. Like they get introduced that like they're out, they broke out and they're free. And they run into Kevin, like they kind of have like a, ships passing the night moment a couple times before like they finally actually like meet up and confront and basically like mess with Kevin. And then he gets away. And it's like, all right, well, like they're like, screw it, we've got our plan. It would have been great if Marv hadn't like spilled the entire plan to Kevin, but whatever.
Yeah.
And then like but it sets up for again the third act. And so this movie instead we get the great second act of Kevin doing all of like the hotel hijinks and stuff with Tim Curry and Rob Schneider, and him just getting to kind of like enjoy New York as it's almost like the blank check effect of like
exactly
he's got a whole bunch of money and so he's gonna like hire a limo and with a pizza and drive around and see the sights and do all this cool stuff. So yeah, I loved like the second act of this movie almost as much as anything else.
Yeah, I'm with you there too. And going with a limo driver, like I that definitely made me think of Blank Check. And I was like, I wonder why they didn't make the limo driver like more of a character. Like, and that is 100% just me thinking of Blank Check, where that guy's like a whole side character. But I was like, that could have been an interesting thing. But then I did realize I was like, well, he is a limo driver for like a really prestigious hotel, so that's not he's not like he's not normally like a goofball. Like normally you're a little bit more like straightforward, you know.
And
but like
Kevin is just like one of many clients that he's dealing with that week or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like just so much fun. And then I do love the like we talked about it a little bit last week, whereas like the Santa Claus 2 definitely goes in a different direction for its story. This very much is like a very beat for beat kind of like recreation of the first one. But again, as we touched on a little bit last week, like when that formula is as good as this, sure, like go ahead and kind of hit those same notes. So you get, instead of like Old Man Marley or whatever it was, you get the pigeon lady in this. And I love that like he's initially afraid of her, but like almost reflects back on how that ended up turning out with Old Man Marley last year. And so like he opens up and is like, I'm sorry I yelled at your face. Would you like to be friends? And they have like this wonderful little heart-to-heart scene that is just the church scene last time around, but here with instead of like an old man who's kind of disconnected from his family, it's an older woman who never found love or got scorned and has kind of gone homeless. But like it's Kevin making friends with like the downtrodden or the overlooked again, in a way that's going to pay off for him in the end. And just as a fun little like, it's a great little scene. And it's like these are the scenes where like Kevin / Macaulay Culkin are just like wise beyond their years, and just like the kinds of profound back and forth they're having with these like full grown adults. But yeah, I love that scene. And just like the fact that it's like in the rafters of some kind of like symphony hall in New York City. It's just like, yep, that checks out. Sure.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there too. And honestly, like everyone in the movie is like a really good actor, but those scenes are also like really well acted between the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, especially like, I know Macaulay Culkin's just like a kid, but I felt like he does a really good job of like not even just being like the precocious kid having fun in New York, but then like bringing that like other ability to just be kind of like wise beyond his years and talk. He gives her like the roller skate analogy,
mm-hmm.
of like, if don't use it, then you won't be able to, when you need to.
Yeah.
And but yeah, like I definitely like those moments, and I like that it kind of ends with her giving kind of the doves and kind of going full circle on that, like that gift from Duncan.
Yeah.
And then that always made me wonder, like I definitely didn't get the vibe this time, but there were times when I was a kid where I got the vibe where I was like, is Duncan magic, or is he like Santa Claus or something? Because like it's that thing where like he gives her the doves, and then like he also gives them the gifts and everything. But I also realized, like, as an adult watching it, I'm like, nah, I mean, he is just a guy that owns a toy store, and that's also, he just had toys to give them.
Yeah.
Like, that makes a complete sense. Like, he's not just Santa Claus. Like,
yeah. Yeah. No, that's yeah. But yeah, I mean, is that there's a little bit of like movie magic happening there, because there are like, okay, like, could he have connected all of the dots to get like to like, how would he have known that like Kevin was at the Plaza or whatever, like how, like,
yeah,
and that his whole family was there, like there's a little bit of like, yeah, just like, oh, it's some kind of magic. But yeah, the fact that he had access to all those toys and could be generous in spirit like that, and so maybe it was like, because Kevin does sign his name,
yeah.
so maybe he did like a little bit of like late night sleuthing there on Christmas Eve to and then like got a whole bunch of delivery people and probably his own staff to like have to work on Christmas to load up the Plaza Hotel penthouse suite with a whole bunch of Christmas gifts for Kevin's entire family, and just, I guess, hope that like they all like just random generic toys. But hey, they're, beggars can't be choosers when you're, stranded in New York on Christmas Day, that you were not planning to be there. I want to shout out, just because like I love the Pigeon Lady so much, and like this movie is so iconic to me in her relationship with Kevin, that like I could have sworn she was in other things, like, and more so, and like the other thing I probably actually really recognize her from is probably Angels in the Outfield.
Yeah,
but like,
definitely.
but like, she was such a presence of my childhood that I was like, oh, she must have been in a ton of other things. And going through her IMDb, I was like, oh, I don't really recognize like a ton of this stuff, admittedly, because she's, she was I think she's like Irish, so like a lot of the stuff she'd done would have been on like BBC stuff,
Yeah,
prior to this. This is easily like her big breakout role kind of thing. But it was just one of those, like, she was so like ingrained in my memory that I imagined I had seen her so many other places. A little bit like Art last week, Art Lafleur as the Tooth Fairy. Like,
yeah.
I knew him so much as like the Tooth Fairy, and then as like Babe Ruth, that like I could have sworn I'd seen him in a million other things. And he, was a character actor who did a ton of stuff, but like not a ton of stuff I would have seen or recognized, kind of thing. But yeah, so like, I want to give a shout out to this little bit of trivia as well. A production draft of the script originally included an extended scene after the police arrest Harry and Marv in Central Park, where the Pigeon Lady's real name is revealed as Annie after one of the officers, who happens to be acquainted with her, invites her back to the station for hot cocoa, and she accepts, leaving the park with them in a squad car where they sing Jingle Bells. So like, I like that in that like deleted / like, I don't think they shot it, but like there's a scene out there where they gave like kind of closure to her story, and like kept her interaction with Kevin helped her open up and like potentially find love again, or put herself out there again for hot cocoa with a cop, singing Jingle Bells. So
That would have been cool. That's like the fun little scene. And honestly, if they did film it, you could have got the cops that the mom talks to.
Yep.
Like, you could have just got it could have been like another weird like full circle thing.
Yep.
Like,
indeed. Yeah, I there's so many fun little bits in this movie. The other thing, alongside the dream of getting a limo and a a giant pizza, a la that John Mulaney bit, the like his overutilization of room service,
yes,
including like the guy making the sundae for him while he's watching the movie to set that bit up for later. It's just like, yeah, that's just a guy who just came in and was like in this ritzy glitzy place making the ice cream sundae for him or whatever. And then also I love him going to the pool and just being like,
yeah,
does anybody mind if I work on my cannonball? And everybody just being like, yeah, whatever. And he just goes in and jumps in the pool. losing his
Oh,
trunks in the process.
which also makes sense because they're just like these
They
adult man
they are
trunks.
giant
That,
trunks, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
One thing I did kind of want to give a quick shout out to too is just like, I mean, it probably goes without saying because it was John Williams, but like the music in this movie is like really good.
Mhm.
And like throughout the whole movie, it's really good and it really fits the tone and it definitely nails those like Christmassy vibes. But I also always want to give a shout out to the specific song that plays when he starts like running to get the stuff set up, and it kind of plays over the montage of him setting up the house that's being renovated. That is like such a banger song. Like
Yeah.
it sounds so good, and I've loved it like since I was a kid. Like they just nailed that specific song. I love so much when he's like setting everything up.
Yeah. So I want to circle back to something I said earlier because as I'm looking at the trivia stuff here again. Donald Trump apparently did own the Plaza Hotel at the time. So that checks out that, yeah, he would only appear in a thing that he actually owned. Yeah. The trivia here, in the Plaza lobby where Kevin asked him for directions, Trump owned the hotel during filming. He bought it from the Childs Company, now Sonesta, for $470 million in 1988, then sold a controlling interest to Saudi and Asian investors for $325 million in 1995, retaining a management and policy setting role in the hotel's operations. So again, fuck that guy. But that also helps explain that, yep, it was still entirely self-serving. He sold out the Plaza to this movie as advertising for the Plaza Hotel, advertising for his own hotel. So yep. All right, that is the most Donald Trump thing I could have found. I'll also shout out another little cameo there. Ali Sheedy is the from the Breakfast Club, of course, is the airport gate attendant that tells Kevin that he's in New York. So shout out to her, which I didn't like. I definitely didn't catch, but I also wasn't looking for it. I wasn't like, oh, I wonder if that's somebody I would know. But seeing that here as a couple little things, totally makes sense. And she was like, I think she cameos in a handful of things around that era as well. Also shout out to Marv / Daniel Stern being Jewish and being like, and happy Hanukkah.
Yes.
Of course, in stealing the all the money from the toy chest. Also, I love that their plan is just like hide in these, giant dollhouses and nobody will find them. And it works. Like I remember,
I could see that working.
Especially in this era. Like I remember so many times wanting to like try and do that. Like the thing I would do as a kid. So clothing racks in this era were like circular things.
Oh yeah,
and like
definitely.
If it was like dresses, you could just like sneak in there and just hide like in the middle of the clothing rack, and like all of the dresses would just be there. And like I would hide from my parents in groceries or in department stores doing that, and like playing hide and seek from them. I definitely should have been kidnapped as a child doing that kind of stuff. But it was definitely one of those things of like, I would see this and think about like, what if I snuck in and tried to stay in a toy store overnight or something like that? Not to steal shit, just to play in a toy store overnight when have full reign of everything. Like I definitely remember having those thoughts. I wonder how many other kids, or if other kids actually did attempt that. If there was like a spree of like kid B&Es after Lost in New York came out, of kids doing that and trying to basically stay in toy stores overnight. But yeah. What do you think? What are your favorites of the like just murder spree that he goes on at the end of the film there?
So yeah, this is I appreciate you asking this, because the one that I think really got me this time is the Toolbox.
Okay.
Because like for more of a production standpoint at this point, I was like, that's amazing, because that's like a practical effect, it looks like.
Yeah.
And it doesn't like, it's not that he throws it down and it like tumbles around. Like it rides all of the stairs down and like all of the tools are flying out all over the place.
Uh-huh.
And I noticed that like they kind of did it really smart, because I think what they did is they tied the rope around it and they kept like pulling it all the way down so it didn't like fall over. But then that makes sense, because then it almost just like, that's the same rope that like Kevin sets up. So it almost like you don't like it's a thing of like, it's a production thing, and it also works with the way that like Kevin set up that trap, if that makes sense, you know?
Yeah.
Like I thought that was really clever.
Yeah, it absolutely defies physics in every
Yes.
possible sense. Like, it would have made more sense if, like, pulling it tipped the thing down, and then it like went down kind of top first and just kind of like skated down like a toboggan kind of thing down the
Yeah.
rest of the stairs. The fact that like it stays upright and just kind of like jostles its way down the stairs, and then when it gets to the bottom of the stairs, just kind of like propels them in the door to the wall. It's like, nope, that's not at all how that would work. But like if it had like been barreling down full speed, I could have seen that like it hits the bottom and kind of like bounces and like crashes them in. So like I almost wish it had been a little bit more like that, but I do appreciate just like the absurdity of it is fun. And yeah, it is just like a crazy like dancing tool chest bouncing downstairs, losing its shit everywhere. Probably my favorite in this, just from a like devious, just, oh, that is the biggest dick move you could make, is lighting the rope with kerosene.
Yeah, I had that
as
same
they're
thought. I was
as they're
like,
climbing
wow,
down.
damn.
It's like, oh, yep, they're fucked at this point, because they can't they can't climb up in time, and they're too far to try and like slide down or anything. And so yeah, like, yeah, that is just like the most murdersome of it, because it's like, yeah, you are going to kill these guys from the fall, from the fire, from any number of things. They do not walk out of this alive. And you did that, Kevin. You murdered these people. um, in addition to all the other times you've already murdered them throughout that sequence. But yeah, that's the one, like, because I think I just had forgotten that like he also lights it at the end. Like it was like they give you that like shot of kerosene on the roof to like remind you of that, and it's not until like Marv is like, what does this smell, and Harry's like, it's kerosene, that I'm like, oh, that's right, Kevin hasn't left, he's still there at the bottom. And
Yep.
strikes up the match, and boom. Just a very brutal Kevin McAllister. And the fact that like not only do they, get burned and fall, a couple stories, they fall into the scaffolding that then like flies all that varnish into the air, and just more cans of shit, just not only heavy cans of shit, but all the varnish getting on top of them as well. That's going to set up for like the sticky bandits tar and feather kind of sequence with the pigeons in a little bit. Yeah.
And going off that too, I did like the bit when they're getting arrested and he's like, Marv won't stop talking. And it's so he just keeps like giving away not only all their like secrets, but also I love, he's like, it's the sticky bandits, ST. He's like, and then the cop is like, I, and he's like, I, and then like, I thought that was so funny.
Yeah, it's like it's like the one thing where, because Kevin like recorded Marv like earlier, when he was going through his whole spiel too, and it's like, he didn't even need to do that, because Marv has no problem like announcing to the world their criminal exploits, much to Harry's chagrin.
I wonder if that tape has all the other stuff from the rest of the movie still on it, like Uncle Frank in the shower and him doing the hotel call, and like so the police have to like fast forward to get to the confession.
Yeah, they're like, what? Why is there an ad for the Plaza Hotel on this thing? Yeah. So much just fun and joy in this movie. And I love that even the resolution, the climax kind of between Kevin and his mom is set up at the beginning of like, Kevin doesn't want to go to Florida because he wants Christmas trees. There aren't Christmas trees in Florida. And so like, where's the mom gonna find Kevin? The biggest Christmas tree in the world there in Rockefeller Center. And there's that, the fun little timing bit of like, I wish I could see them or whatever. And then like the mom immediately appears like, wow, that was fast. You do good work kind of thing. Just a ton of joy to this film. Any final bits or thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I think that's pretty much it. Like, I definitely just still really love the movie and think it holds up, and it probably will for like a really long time, hopefully.
I mean, like it absolutely holds up apart from like the technology aspect. Like it holds up in that like you have to recognize it is a period piece of the 90s.
Yeah.
But apart from that, if you can get kind of like past that, we're not in a digital age. There's no cell phones, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it very much holds up in a fun, joyous, and just incredibly well crafted, like very minimal plot holes or anything like that. Just kind of a fun way. I definitely am curious what the the uncle's family is going to think when they come back to the house that has been like booby trapped to crazy. Also, I guess I will say, like, I don't quite understand the level of booby traps that are related to tying a string to a doorknob.
Yeah.
Because there's like 3 of those in this, right? There's the like the staple gun at the beginning.
Yeah.
There's the tool chest that we already talked about, and I feel like there was one other one in there somewhere. But maybe I'm conflating. Because I guess the one that Harry deals with, like he opens the door and it's the bag
Yeah.
of tools that drops on his head. I guess there isn't he doesn't have another one that he deals with. It's yeah. Anyway, there's still like it's still like how does that work? Like
Yeah.
but whatever. It's all good. All right. Well, let's go ahead and dive into the report card. We grade the film from A+ to F. What do you want to give Home Alone 2 Lost in New York, Frank?
Yeah, for me, I definitely think this one is a A plus. I definitely still love it a lot, and I think it's still a great movie that I wouldn't really change that much about. And I think we kind of hit on all the reasons why already, but I definitely still love it for sure.
Yeah, I'm very much in the same boat with you. A+, easy A+ on this one. Solid, just joyous fun here. Extra credit if you like this. The suggestions from Disney Plus for you are Home Alone 3, which is the first one without Macaulay Culkin, which again we may visit next year. It'd be interesting to see what that one looks like. The original
I would be interested because I've never seen it. Like we
Yeah.
had it on VHS, but I never put it in and watched it because I was like, this isn't Macaulay Culkin. I don't want to like. As a kid, I didn't want nothing to do with
Yeah,
it.
exactly. We had such discerning tastes. We knew that it was a knockoff. Just trying to keep the brand alive. The original Home Alone is a suggestion on there. The new Home Sweet Home Alone seems to be basically the first movie, but with one of the British kids from Jojo Rabbit.
Oh yeah.
Not the main one, like the friend. Like he's the kid, he's the Kevin this time around. I know at least it at least has a cameo from the guy who plays Buzz. So like it's still it's in this same universe, and he is like
Oh okay.
he's now a cop in that neighborhood or whatever. Because he's in the trailer, and you can see like on his badge McAllister. But yeah, I've not heard great things about Home Sweet Home Alone. So, but
Yeah.
maybe we'll circle to that one someday. Noel with Anna Kendrick is recommendation out there. The Santa Claus, which we have talked about on the show before. Richie Rich Christmas Wish. I'll be
I
home
love
for
that one.
yeah, I'll be home for Christmas, and 'Twas the Night are the recommendations there. Like I said, next week we'll be talking about Jingle All the Way, so stay tuned for that episode. Extracurriculars. It's weird because we're recording this ahead of time because I'm going to Disneyland this week. So like we talked last week in the Santa Claus 2 episode about like the other thing we're watching being like Hawkeye. I imagine as this is airing, Frank and I are both also keeping up with Hawkeye, but we're recording it ahead of that the new episode. So I'm guessing you haven't really watched anything else since we recorded Santa Claus a couple days ago, Frank.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at as well. But that is going to do it for this episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you again, Frank, for joining me to talk about Home Alone 2 Lost in New York. You can follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Frank?
Yeah, yeah. Just a shout out to our other one of our other podcasts, That Nerdy Site Show. At the time you're listening to this, I'm not sure what the most recent episode is necessarily about because of the out of order recording that Trevor mentioned.
Cameron and I are going to record it in a couple hours. So yeah, I don't know what it's going to be about either.
But I'm sure it's a good, fun time that I definitely recommend people check out.
Yeah. I imagine this one, I mean, at least the thing I'm planning on bringing to the table on this is going to be Tick, Tick, Boom, which I really enjoyed a couple weeks ago. And I've been waiting to, talk about it, hoping like that Logan would hop on and watch it. But he snoozed, he loses. So I'm just gonna give my thoughts on that. I imagine Cameron has been playing a lot of Final Fantasy 14 online this weekend, because we're recording this basically the weekend that game launched in early access, and Cameron has fortunately been able to get into it and face off a lot of the queues. I have not. I've only played a little bit of that game so far, the Endwalker expansion specifically. But yeah, check out That Nerdy Site show for whatever we talked about on this last week's episode. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. I will shout out the Let's Plays that went up this week, or as we were recording this, that will go up this week. I mentioned this to Frank last week, I think, but I sat down with IGN 25 the game for a full playthrough of that little web browser game for one of the Let's Plays this week, as well as the kind of opening tutorial section of Solar Ash. So you can go check those out on the site, or on youtube.com/thatnerdysite. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please like, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, class dismissed, and happy holidays.